talked about social responsibility and philanthropy. I don't think that was the topic, but that was the message that I took away, someone correct me. And then we have this, our panelist presentation. In June, we have our summer social where we got to hear from Montana Legal Services, who was awarded our grant last year. And that is the primary part. There's a simple written grant report because we're a program of our beloved Missoula Community Foundation. And I saw Marcy, oh, there she is. I'm like, I saw her, but I wasn't seeing you because you were hidden. Marcy Allen is the executive director. Is that your title? Thanks. Executive director. We are a program of the Missoula Community Foundation. We flirted with becoming a nonprofit, but that's administratively heavy, and we decided to stay a program of this foundation that does so much for our community as far as helping donors get more information, get connected, and then we get to continue that behavior as one of the programs. So, how it works is you can join at any time. We do renewals at the beginning of the year, but if you join before the vote of membership, you get to have a vote. Our vote of the membership on the grant finalist, you get to have a say in who gets that grant. But this year, our grant deadline, we opened the grant a little earlier, July 15th. If you have a nonprofit, you know, that falls into this category that might benefit from applying, they have until August 30th to submit their application. Between August 30th and September 30th, the steering committee, we have a steering committee that consists of 9 to 13 meetings. If you are a member and thinking you want to be a little more involved, we do have some openings for the steering committee. The steering committee selects 3 finalists, and we do everything through a consensus-based decision-making process. So it's quite beautiful how it happens, especially because often we'll have applicants that one of us is either on the board for or has some other conflict of interest. So we have a whole process for tracking that that's quite simple, but also lets us answer to you for the integrity of our decision making. We select 3 finalists. We try to give you a diverse group of finalists that come at the grant focus from a little different angle. That presentation will be October 16th. And then MCAT will join us at that presentation. So if you aren't able to make it, you'll be able to watch a video, and voting is from October 17th to November 14th. And then we will announce the winner, and you will get that information. The winner again gets $15,000 this year, and the 2 finalists, so all 3 of the presenters, get honored for their time. And honestly, they're excellent. Like last year, we had a hard time. We had some amazing applications. And so that's the grant schedule. What did I forget? Next. Oh, yay! Now I get to introduce our fabulous moderator who will introduce our impressive panelists. So I'm going to read this and then I'm going to really tell you about Molly. So Molly has worked in nonprofit management, primarily in museums for the last 30 years. She got her bachelor's from the University of Pennsylvania, which you forgive me for, and her master's in public management from, I'm teasing, Carnegie Mellon University. She is currently the executive director of Travelers Rest Connection, a significant historic site of the Lewis and Clark expedition in the Salish Police Bay people. Molly has worked with Mr. Rogers on a children's museum exhibit, and I forgot something really important. I'm going to almost introduce Molly. Before I finish introducing Molly, I just want to acknowledge that we are on the traditional lands of the Salish and Police Bay people. And actually, anytime you're in the United States, you're on traditional indigenous land. And we want to honor and hold dear the sacredness with which they have taught us and how to care for the land, space, and place, and honestly for each other. So back to Molly, who's worked with Mr. Rogers on a children's museum exhibit, raised funds to support individuals with developmental disabilities. As a mother, I say thank you. Been a stay-at-home mom, super, most important job you've had, and a PTO president. Ooh, you were a glutton. And is the survivor of sexual assault. And thank you for being willing to speak to that. And ovarian cancer. And thank you for all you do there, too. I'm a fan of Molly's. She's president of Missoula's Destination Board, but now I get to talk about Molly. So Molly is a founding member of the Women's Giving Circle that we were started with the Montana Women's Foundation And the Missoula Community Foundation is a collaborative thing to see what can happen. And I hope that when you sit here and you moderate tonight, you realize what a significant part you are playing and have played in what has happened for this circle and for our community because of it. So I get the privilege of introducing, welcome, Molly Satya.
Thank you. And I just want to say, from my perspective, for those of you who are considering joining the Women's Civic Circle, one of the most important things for me is, you know, as a stay-at-home mom for many years and the executive director of a small nonprofit organization, I don't have the kind of resources where I can make giant philanthropic gifts. But because of the circle, I can add my donation to those of everybody else in the room and know that it's going towards something as important as a $15,000 grant, which can be a game changer for an organization the size of mine, for sure. You know, I do a monthly donation. It comes out of my checking account once a month, and it doesn't impact my budget that drastically, and yet I'm still part of this larger philanthropic effort. So if you're thinking about it and you have questions, please don't hesitate to visit with me. I'm honored to be asked to chair or to moderate this panel tonight. Not chair this panel. Moderate this panel tonight. And I'm going to read some brief introductions of all three of the beautiful women who are here with me tonight, and then we're going to start asking them some questions. So immediately to my left is Amy Sings in the Timber, and she is the executive director of the Montana Innocence Project. She came here with over a dozen years of nonprofit leadership experience and more than 20 years of professional commitment to advancing social and racial justice and human rights issues. Amy's a practicing attorney who has directly represented formerly incarcerated and trafficked women to reunite them with their children. Over the past 2 decades, she's developed and supported access to justice and legal aid programs designed to address disparities in our justice system and promote the rule of law. Worked with communities to break down barriers and identify and develop solutions to complex societal and institutional challenges, and advocated for a trauma-informed continuum of care, sustainable, stable housing models, and economic and educational advancement opportunities for marginalized and disenfranchised peoples. Before joining the Innocence Project, Amy served as Executive Director of the Montana Justice Foundation and in senior leadership roles with the Chicago Bar Foundation and Covenant House in Illinois. Amy received her law degree from the now Alexander Blewett III School of Law. It's not full. Okay. I'm going to be out of order. Are you okay with that? Yeah. Excellent. All right, we're going to go next to Melissa Gluckert. Melissa holds both her master's and bachelor's degrees in social work from the University of Montana, graduating with the master's in 2023. So, young, fresh, with lots of energy. Her passion for public service and civic engagement began during her time as a student leader, first as a senator and later as vice president of the Associated Students of the University of Montana. She focused her studies primarily on mental health advocacy across Montana's higher education system. Melissa currently serves as a neighborhood specialist for the city of Missoula, where she has worked for nearly 2 years. In this role, she collaborates with 18 neighborhood councils to help empower, engage, and educate residents about local government. She is passionate about making government more accessible and helping communities understand how they can have a voice in shaping their city. And I just have to say about the neighborhood councils, my neighborhood council's name is cooler than yours because we are the Moose Can Gully neighborhood. And finally, I would like to introduce April Charlo. Connector, advocate, cultural caretaker. April Charlo is a resource partner and a member of the Bittert Salish tribe. Salish House Big people. She applies her expertise to empower communities and drive systemic change. As a co-founder of, I'm not going to be able to pronounce it, I'm sorry. Sinquesamisten. Woo! Yes. April works to address the tribal foster care crisis while instilling and preserving Salish culture, traditions, and ceremonies, ensuring these rich legacies thrive for future generations. Known for her adaptability and collaborative spirit, April is deeply committed to bridging cultural heritage and innovative solutions. She holds a bachelor's degree in Native American Studies from Salish Community College, and a master's in educational leadership from the University of Montana. Her home on the Flathead Reservation is shared with her biological son, adopted daughter, and a beloved rescued Res dog. Everybody loves a Res dog.
Yeah, you know, has 3 legs.
Oh.
Yeah, you know.
All right, well, to get started, and I think I'm actually going to work back the other way. I'm going to start with April. Okay. And I wanted to just start with a general question. How do you define civic engagement and community advocacy? Are they the same thing? What are the differences?
Yeah, thank you for the introduction, and nice to meet all of you somewhat in that way. Yeah, so what's interesting for me is in my role at Headwaters, I work primarily with the new framework that we just rolled out, which is called the Family Strong framework. And so there's actually 2 kind of pillars, and so Ren, my coworker, she's the one who really does the civic engagement work, and I do the work with organizations, because we're looking to fund organizations that give opportunity to families and youth to advocate for the social determinants of health that are affecting them. And that can show up in a whole variety of different ways. And so, you know, because I'm sure when we get to Amy, Amy's gonna be like, I will tell you exactly what these 2 things are. So I'll actually leave that for Amy. But you know, from my lens, you know, because it's like voting and you know, being in the streets and things like that is kind of the difference. For me, in the work that I have done, where I have found the civic engagement and community advocacy is starting a nonprofit where addressing the community needs that I am drawn to. You know, foster care. You know, we have just up on the reservation, we still have just you know, like a big issue with foster care, and so that's where my civic engagement and my community advocacy came into play, and also believing that we're not meant to do any big thing alone. You know, like how this women's circle comes together. It's like we're meant to do things together. So getting a group of co-founders to co-found Cinque Mason, and that's kind of how it shows up for me. And then the organizations, you know, that I know that we'll talk about later. But that's kind of for me. Yeah.
Thank you. All right, Melissa, what do you think?
I think, sorry, I feel so overwhelmed because I'm just like with so many like wonderful smart people. I think that they're very different. I think that they work together. I think civic engagement, when I think of civic engagement, I really think of government and kind of like bureaucracy and you know, getting out to vote, serving on your neighborhood council, going to a city council meeting, and I think of community advocacy as wanting to move forward, wanting to do something. So, you know, maybe organizing a campaign for letter writing for the legislature. But I think they work together a lot. I think mostly in my role with the neighborhood councils, we do a lot of civic engagement. So just trying to understand those complex systems of bureaucracy and how do you get through them. And I think that that's really important on the first step to community advocacy, because I think those are really hard to navigate for a lot of people. I feel like very well educated around it, and I still am like so overwhelmed with it sometimes, and I just think that that's a good step to make change happen.
Awesome, thank you. Amy, how about you? The difference or the similarities between civic engagement and community advocacy?
Well, I will refrain from giving you the legal definition. And I'll just say, you know, I think that Melissa and April have already hit on sort of the key distinguishing factors between the two. But what I find to be important about the aspect of civic engagement is that it means that you are using the tools that you have at your, you know, what you have within your control to create change in a way that is lasting. that actually you can build upon and move forward in different ways. And so when I think of that, I think we all think of voting as civic engagement, but voting is just one step in that process. It's like maybe the most critical step in that process, and then making sure that we're continually checking in on how the folks that we voted for or didn't vote for are performing, and continuing to check in on a regular basis. Civic engagement is not something that you can just dip into and dip out of if you expect for there to be real meaningful and lasting change. As far as community advocacy goes, I think that there's so many different levels of community advocacy. We can be, first, can everybody hear us? Okay. I completely hear about it. I will try to project better. Am I projecting better? Okay, great. I think there are many different levels of community advocacy, and there is no one space or place that we advocate for our communities. We could be advocating for Missoula as our community, but it could be Mooscan, right? And then I also think of communities as being communities of individuals who have commonalities, and advocating for those who historically and ongoing have been marginalized or disenfranchised in the way that April was talking about. Her personal community advocacy is really focused on foster children because that's meaningful to her. So I think that thinking about it, in that way, more globally, is important too.
Awesome. Okay. So if folks who are having trouble here want to move on up, fill in the aisles, come closer, please. We want everybody to have a conversation.
Yeah, it's such a nice group that, we don't have to, like, people come closer. Put a row in front of the row.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we could sit in a circle.
So we could like walk around.
Right?
We gotta think of Neil.
Oh, yeah, or Neil.
Neil, are you picking us up?
No.
You are? Okay, good.
All right. Okay, I want to build on something that April said, actually. I love that you said we are meant to do things together.
Yeah.
As somebody who works in the history and social science space, I've been doing a lot of reading lately. I've been refreshing my Alexis de Tocqueville, Democracy in America, and how many people in here have heard of Robert Putnam and Bowling Alone? He's got a new book out, a newer book called The Upswing that I just picked up here at the library. Sorry, I have the on copy. I'll bring it back soon. But a lot of social scientists for literal centuries have talked about the power of American associations and service organizations. And I'm wondering, in the spirit of that, we are meant to do things together. How do you see that power of association at play in Missoula? Who wants to take that one?
I think, because it's, or what?
It doesn't have to be just Missoula. I just wanted to say, it doesn't have to be just Missoula.
Nice, okay. Well, because it's nice because, and I can project, now that I know I gotta talk louder, I'll talk louder! So I went from a nonprofit world and knowing only grassroots organizing to being on the foundation side. And so it's been really, it's been great to be able to have relationships. It's exciting to see the organizations in Missoula and so, so some of those organizations that come together, they come together for different reasons. And there's this one that just came to my attention. They're called, they're called the Angry Moms, and they're the ones who put on queer prom. They're the ones that help put and it's so, nice.
Could you hold on 1 second?
I will.
Set it up. Yeah. Okay, switch it on.
Hello?
Oh, stop. Just passed on down the line.
Yeah, microphone. I like that little kid that gets the microphone and just wants to sing.
Is that too loud? Is that good?
Strumming my pain. I love these things. They're so fun. It just changes up in the back. Singing my life when it was. So it's you know, and I named them because it's like Missoula really does have this energy about it where it's like if there is something that is unjust or not happening for a group of people, they will come together. I mean, like, look at Missoula making, you know, it's like, you know, like the pride flag becomes illegal, Missoula changes the Missoula flag to the pride flag. There's a really amazing energy in Missoula, and I can, as we get to the question where we're going to name those organizations, I can do that, but yeah, I think
Okay, so I think, and I'm going to speak again outside of Missoula as well. I oftentimes feel like when there is a need, people come together to fill a need. In the same respect, I feel like sometimes there are certain individuals or organizations that they're just key to raising visibility for particular issues. And I think, like, if you're somebody who has a child, or you yourself are a part of the queer community, then you might have been aware of that amazing effort. And if you weren't, and that's something that I think Missoula does particularly well, but I also think that it's an important part of that kind of advocacy everywhere, is that not everybody is going to come together in the same way that you all are here. And so making certain that we are providing spaces in our communities for individuals or organizations to really raise up those issues and sometimes coming together in smaller groups to raise up those issues so that they get some broader reach. But that is something that I do think that Missoula does particularly well, is provide those spaces.
This one, okay, there we go. Do you have some thoughts about that, Melissa?
I don't really have a lot of thoughts about that. This was a hard question for me, and I think you guys covered it really well, so I won't even.
Okay, well, I'm gonna switch up the order of the questions, so I apologize, but hold that microphone, because the next thing that I wanted to really ask about is, you know, this group of people that is in the room already are very engaged in the community and they're interested in these topics, but we want to know, how do we bring in more young people? And as somebody who's a recent graduate, relatively, I'd love to hear what you think about bringing more people, young people, into civic engagement and community advocacy.
Yeah, so I'm 27, just so you guys know.
But still just out of youth.
Yes, I feel out of youth sometimes. I have a dog at home and I'm like, oh, someone trusted me with this. But I think this is the $1 million question though, especially in my work. I feel like most of our time is trying to get out and engage people who are not typically engaged with the city. And I think, yeah, I wish I had the best answer, but I think, you know, traditionally we have done things like I'm an extension of the city, so we, you know, notice our agendas and put it on the calendar on the city website. And if you're not looking at those things, maybe you don't know. So we really tried a lot of different ways to get out and really invite people into a community space rather than, you know, asking something for them. So a lot of our general meetings we have usually once a year for neighborhoods. We, you know, have food, and we usually have, you know, some sort of like tabling from organizations, and we really wanted to make it a space where people can just show up. You know, there's no obligation from anyone. Like, show up and hopefully, you know, you can learn something, you can know who we are, you can engage. I think meeting people where they're at is super important. And I think obviously the internet's been really big, so I think using things like social media is a really great way. We do not have social media really because I'm an extension of the city, but we, we've done mailings, which are expensive. It's hard to get out the word without money, unfortunately. We do door hangers, we do the sandwich boards, so the A-frame signs that are on the sidewalks, things like that. But those are how we try to engage people, where it's like, come enjoy a meal, come enjoy some ice cream, and that's what we want from you. And if you stay, hopefully you can look around and maybe see some of these people who are, we have a lot of, usually we have people tabling from community organizations or city departments, and that's been really great because people can choose who they engage with too. Like traditionally those have been like presentation-based meetings in the past, and I think people my age are really not necessarily wanting to sit down for an hour or 2 hours and have people talk to them. Like they want to engage with people. So like going to a public works and mobility department table and saying, hey, this traffic thing I'm really upset by, and having those communications. So that was really long-winded, sorry.
Yeah, so youth work is my favorite work of all time. It's something that really lights me up. I had some pretty unique experiences of being a youth and having opportunities that I think pulled me. There's a few reasons why I got pulled up by my bootstraps, because I was definitely headed in the direction of being a reservation statistic young woman. So how do we engage? Are we talking about in the sense of in the women's giving circle or in general?
I think in general.
Okay, because I had two streams going on in my head. So,
although we would always love to hear about how to get more young women in this circle.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. Well, and so Empower Montana, they were an organization I was going to talk about. They have been incredible about figuring out how to bring youth to the table in an authentic way. And so it's not just bringing them to the table and then being able to just check the box, okay, we have a youth here, yay, but they don't have voting power, they don't have, a lot of, just a lot of power to say stuff. They can say stuff and offer up stuff, but it doesn't, and so being able, that's one key thing, and making it relevant to their lives. And so one awesome thing that hopefully you'll get to see something from Headwaters is we're just researching right now how to do youth participatory grant making, and that might even be an idea for the Women's Giving Circle, you sponsor a couple of youth to be on and they get to help, decide. And so what we're thinking is we're just really exploring what is happening for youth participatory grant making out there. Are they seeking out the problem and then getting those things funded, or are they making decision coming into the Women's Giving Circle and then they get a vote on what gets funded or not? Let them lead and not just join. So it's like that, just don't just check the box if they're getting involved, and then back them with resources. Having mentors, even at my age, I'm coming up on 50 years old. Everyone gasp. Thank you. So it's still really important for me to be a mentor. I've never been in philanthropy. I've never been in this role, and so it's one of those things to be able to have mentors, and I think we should all have mentors at all ages, and it's beneficial, but especially for youth, if we could figure out some mentorship work.
So I can't agree more with the meeting folks where they're at, and that's just across the board, youth or in any circle. But a couple of things that I was thinking about, because I also was thinking on the two tracks of engaging youth in general, but also engaging youth right here in this space. And we, my organization, often we go and speak at the high schools. We go and speak at different, with different youth groups. We've been invited to speak to the Youth and Democracy the kiddos through humanities Montana who said, this is the thing that we want to know more about. And so we always try to make the space and time to engage in those ways. I think that there's some disconnect and apprehension sometimes. I think that bringing younger people into the spaces that you're already in can feel a little intimidating, but it can also, and don't take this the wrong way, it can also feel boring to them. And so making sure that you're tailoring whatever it is you're doing. I certainly don't take the same talk, I don't take the same presentation that I would to like the Montana Judges Association into the high school. I'm making sure that I've done a little bit of my own homework to find out like how folks talk and what matters to them, and no matter how young the folk is. So that's one thing. And then just like reducing barriers to it. My kind of thought about getting a younger demographic engaged with the Women's Giving Circle is, I know your lowest threshold is 120. Is that correct?
We have had
We have a student membership.
You do? Okay. Okay.
Humanist.
Yeah. But when I think about how I became engaged in civic engagement and my community, it was my family, and it was, like my mentors in different ways. And so if you all have, those young people in your lives from different circles, then I think it could be like a bring your person to work kind of day, but you would be riffing on that here. And then I just agree with all the things that April had said about making sure that they actually have a meaningful role in the work that is being done, and that their voices are being listened to. And I could not agree more about food they can
Such a community thing, is sharing a meal.
Absolutely. Well, and Amy, you just started something that leads into my next question beautifully, so thank you for that. I tell a story all the time that when I was a small child, I'm one of 5 children. I grew up in Western Pennsylvania. My mother would bring all 5 of us and hustle us into the voting booth with her and close the curtain behind her, so that we were all there to observe the voting process. And then I carried that on with my own children. They always came with me to vote. And I wondered if all 3 of you would be willing to share a little bit about your earliest memories of civic engagement or advocacy. My bio says I was a PTO president. That comes directly from my mother as well. You think you're not going to grow up to be your mother. Yes, you are. But that's part of my history of community work is from my own mom. But I wonder where it comes from for you guys.
I still have the mic. I'll just elaborate a little bit more on where I was at. Move on down. But I grew up in a neighborhood that was it was all my family on one block. Your cousins and your aunties and uncles and grandparents. We all lived in one neighborhood together, and we made certain that we were supporting our neighbors, the ones that weren't us, but also us. My grandparents' home was very modest, but it was someplace that any neighborhood kid could stop by just to get a bite to eat or to hang out if they didn't have someplace to go after school until their folks got home or whatever, a very working class neighborhood. And then that's the other part of my kind of core of civic engagement and community advocacy is that I came from a very union-based family. I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. My mom's side of the family, many of them worked for Harley Davidson, and many of my dad's family worked for Miller Brewery. And those folks, the same folks who were working on, lines, and they were also the union stewards, and they were taking care of their brothers and sisters in the very literal sense of what a union should be all about. And so all of the grassroots organizing and advocacy, that's where I got that from.
That's so interesting. Your story is interesting because actually my mom also took me to a voting booth twice, and that was a really cool experience for me as a kid. I wouldn't say that's what started. I admittedly, I wasn't really civilly engaged or really cared about politics or anything until I was about 17. And this was 2015, 2016. So I was a senior in high school, and I was taking my first U.S. government class, and I just remember hearing about certain candidates and how they were talking, and I was really upset. I mean, I was like riled up by this election, as I'm sure a lot of people were. And I was 17, I was just gonna turn 18, and I was so ready to like get up and do some change. I was like, I want to change this. And then I got to, it affected me so much. I came here for school, and I started as a political science major because I was just so like passionate, so angry. I feel like that's how like a lot of people get started, at least in my experience. I think like a lot of people are upset or frustrated by something. So I from there I just I did a lot of different things that I felt like I could maybe help at that time, and or like get out the vote and educate people. So that is, that's kind of when I was first civically engaged. When I turned 18, I was so excited to register to vote. That was the first thing I did on my 18th birthday, which is cool. I'm really proud of that. So.
Yeah, I'm going to be taking my kids and my dog into the. That's such a great idea. I love that idea. So I think mine, as I'm sitting here thinking about it, I think mine comes a little bit different. Growing up on the reservation, and there's just a different way of thinking, I guess. And so I had my first Salish class when I was in 7th grade. And it was the first time that I had Salish spoken to me, and kind of like, because I didn't grow up, my dad is 87 years old and the language stopped with him. Like, it's very sad. And so I heard this language, and we're being taught how to say table and chair and wall, and I was just like, oh, this feels amazing, and how to count to 10, and so for me that was, at that time, I was like, this is something that I have to do. I have to learn my language, and I know that's a little bit different than voting and being involved in politics, but it started as a trajectory for me to be huge in language revitalization and huge advocate for Native rights and being aware, and then 2012 becoming aware of colonization. Like, I didn't really understand what colonization was before that time, and I'm like, why is Canada a bunch of Indians in the mall singing and, getting people, like, what is happening? And to hear that, like, they're trying to change laws to lift the regulation on the waterways that come down from the mountain. And they were in arms about it. And so then, so America kind of started to be like, sit up, and the Indians, and that's when it really started to wake up for me, was to really start looking at my life and my colonization and how I have been colonized as a Native person in this world, and how it continues to show up. And so I became very strong about that. The other thing is when I was 18 years old, and alcohol and drugs were really a priority at that time, but my sister was working at we had a group home up there, and I was like, what is this group home, And she said, oh, we have kids there. And I'm like, well, what kids do you have? What kids go there? And she said, She said, you know, like kids who are waiting to get placed into foster care or they're runaways. And I said, well, how old are they? She said, oh, we take anywhere from 7 to 17. I said, 7 years old. And I was like, that's insane. 7? Those poor babies, they just must need to be held. They must be so scared. She said, oh no, we're not allowed to touch them. And at that moment, I was like, that is not okay. And that's when something like rose in me that I was like, we got to do something different. It did take me 20 years to get my together, you know, to get this organization going. But I feel like that's my, you know, may not be voting. You know, I did, of course, get involved in politics because if you want change to happen with, you know, with any, you know, minority groups, you gotta get involved in politics. And then also like understanding how tribal politics, like it was forced upon tribes, you know, this voting, this tribal council, and there's still just this backlash of anybody who's on tribal council. It's like there's a, you know, like it's like, oh, you want to be on tribal council? Awesome. Now I'm just going to talk crap about you the rest of your whole term, and it's not like how it was when, you know, back when we had a social structures that looked a lot different, and I don't even think we had hierarchy. And so that's kind of where my lens is at right now with all this, where it's just like, you know, like, you know, fight the patriarchy, you know, down with hierarchy, you know, it's like, that's kind of where I'm at. And so that's how I got involved in it, and then just really wanting to be involved. And so I do vote. I will bring my kids in. My kids know politics. They're aware, you know, of all that. And my dog. I don't just gonna bring my dog in every chance I can.
I love that. Okay, so I want to ask a couple more sort of brass tacks questions, and then I want to have some time so folks in the room can ask questions as well. But let's start with this group, Women's Giving Circle, has a grant of $15,000 to award. How can that grant help move the needle on civic engagement and community advocacy in Missoula County? And I'm just going to say, I want to caution us all from talking about specific organizations. I know, I'm sorry. But what we don't want to do is have any bias because we don't know who all has applied or will apply for the grant. But think about, in general terms, what kinds of programs should we be looking at? What kind of best practices should we be looking for as we're considering who to give our money to?
So I think some of the things that we all have talked about here earlier in different questions really apply to some of these best practices and how the needle can be moved with a $15,000 grant. I think any organization that you're going to be looking at to do this work needs to be talking about how they're going to meet people where they're at, and kind of give you some clear goals as to how they're, you know, what they're looking to move the needle, and how this grant is going to be able to make that happen. I think we're all, if you've been doing this work for a minute, taking a look at these grants and listening to the presentations of the organizations who have applied to you for other things, you know about benchmarks and goal setting and all of those things. That's, you know, all of that's pretty standard stuff. But in civic engagement work in particular, in community organizing in particular, I think that you should be looking for how they are going to speak to their grassroots movement in order to be able to make those lasting, sustainable changes down the road. So like near-term vision, near-term goals leading to their long-term vision. That's the kind of articulation that would look to. I think that, you know, there's a lot of organizations, and I won't name names, but there's a lot of organizations right here in this community that do an excellent job community organizing on very tight budgets. And so I think that, you know, as Molly was sharing about $15,000 could really mean something significant to a smaller organization. I'm not a big fan of making folks spell out all of the soup to nuts and then holding them to that. I think you need to give organizations trust and flexibility, but they should be able to speak to how their near-term goals are going to advance their long-term vision.
I think that was really great. Ditto. I think there's a grant program in our office, small grants. We usually get $20,000 for up to $6,000 grants. And I think the big thing that we look for is kind of impact. Like, yeah, I think that was a good example, like $15,000 for a small organization. Like, that could change a lot. And I think, yeah, it's important to, you know, think of like, how is this going to impact, and is this going to be a really big impact? And I think sometimes there are a lot of spaces out there that have a lot of routes for getting, you know, donations or other grant, things like that. So I think it's also important to look at, you know, people and you know, is this something that's really going to change your organization? Yeah, is your short-term goal is going to be your long vision. But yeah, I think impact's just really big.
I think, you know, this $15,000 could, and so I shared, you know, not from like my voting experience and things like that. I shared like the other side of what community engagement and the civic engagement can look like on a different level. And so, you know, there are organizations who specifically do that work in Missoula, and there also are other organizations that maybe you can be like, this is civic engagement, this is community advocacy, because they are working with a group of youth to get them interested, to give them opportunities of leadership, to give them opportunities to identify a problem, address it, and go to city council. Like there's an organization in Missoula that did this last year. Naming no names. I don't know if they're applying or not. I know, like, I told you. Yeah, maybe I'll tell them to apply. You know, and so that's where I think it would be beautiful, is that, you know, the youth groups that are happening in Missoula, because there's a few youth groups that are happening in Missoula that are given these amazing opportunities to be, you know, leaders. And Queer Prom, they may not apply, because I guess they don't even apply for anything. That's amazing to me. But like examples like that, where there's youth that get to have a voice and get to have a solution to a problem. And so that, you know, $15,000 could be, you know, where, you know, youth are identifying something in the community and they get the $15,000 to address it. That would be the ideal thing. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to offer one shameless plug, and then I'm going to come around with the microphone and see if anybody out there has questions. The shameless plug is, you may see me up here with this fancy scarf. This is in fact the Declaration of Independence hanging around my neck. I am the vice chair of Montana's commission for the commemoration of the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence in 2026. I have had the opportunity recently to go to DC and to go to Philadelphia and walk in the footsteps of some of the founders of our nation. But the thing that I keep coming away from with all of these meetings is, and while these words are from the Constitution and not the Declaration, that those founders, they were forming a more perfect union, not a perfect union. And I just think that it's so important that we all keep in mind that all of the work that the grant applicants are doing, you know, they're short-term goals leading to a long-term vision, but that we have the grace to accept that not everything is going to work out the way we want it to the first time, that we're all working to be more perfect, and none of us now are perfect. Dawns, forgive my humanness. So I wanted to also let folks know that the Montana 250th Commission is also going to have grant opportunities for organizations who are interested in helping to commemorate the 250th anniversary. It is different focus, but if you are thinking about or talking to organizations that you're involved with, that maybe a Women's Giving Circle grant might not be the right fit, there are other opportunities possibly for them. So I just wanted to put that out into the world. So who has a question in the audience? Marcy, you have a question?
I have like 3 questions, but I'm gonna try to keep it to one. So I'm curious, like just in this time, we live in such a divisive world, and it feels like often like all this news is coming at us, and there's so many things that are going on. And how, as individual community members, would you suggest that we can engage and make change within our own communities? Because I really do believe that like if we are gonna change and we are gonna see things come closer than the divisive world we live in right now, that it needs to start in our community. So I'm just curious if you have suggestions on how, as individuals, we can make change in our own community.
Be a mentor. Be a mentor. That's like, I'm guessing because you all wanted to, some of you are soon to be, hey, just kidding, on the Women's Giving Circle. I have no reason to recruit you. I just, I am betting that you all are incredible women with gifts to share, with a youth in this community that could change their life. Jamie left. Jamie works for the Friends of the Children, and their goal, and it's pretty amazing, where they pair a mentor with starting at age 5, and they carry them all the way through. This mentor stays with them all the way until they're 18 years old, and probably beyond. I doubt that relationship stops at 18. And the data that has come from that, the success of those children, is just it's knocked out of the park, and it's this belief that when anybody, and that's what happened for me, is that somebody paid attention to me at the right time that got me out of that trajectory that I was, rocketing towards. And I think that could be one of the things where it's like, it may not feel like a lot, but you have no idea what a mentor of a youth could do for them. So that's the thing.
Yeah, I think we underestimate ourselves as individuals. I think as individuals we can do a lot, and we can have a lot of conversations, and we can, that can expand. You're talking with one person, and they talk to the next, and it can be, what do you call it? Yeah, you push the domino and they all fall down. That's what it should be. But yeah, I think it's hard when you're. I think it's hard to remember that when you're a single person, and then it seems like the world is just kind of falling down around you. But yeah, I think it's extremely important to have conversations with people, and I'm very passionate about being able to hear anyone out, because I feel that I want people to be able to, speak however they are, but I think, either my argument or my beliefs are not strong enough, and maybe I need to reevaluate what I'm thinking, or B, I'm just gonna get stronger in my beliefs. So I'm never threatened by someone else saying, having a discourse with each other. So I think the polarization that's kind of happening in our nation is just, it's really sad to look at, and it's hard, and I think coming together, and I think that's easier said than done, sitting here and being let's all sit in a circle and be happy and compromise. But I just think yeah, don't underestimate yourselves as individuals, and I think working together, having those conversations that are uncomfortable is important.
I just think we didn't get here by accident. We got here by design. And that design is actually, it's doubling down. So we used to spend a lot of time in our communities actually talking to our neighbors and trying to find our common grounds because we knew we had to be in the same spaces as them. But a pandemic and a real like entrenchment in technology and silos and algorithms that basically create echo chambers for us has meant that we haven't had to engage with one another in the same ways that we did for hundreds of years. And so I think it's important to remember how things were and to reinvest in that community outreach and discourse. There's an organization, I serve on the board of a philanthropic organization, and there's a program that the philanthropy that I serve funds in Washington State. And essentially it was two community organizers, a conservative community organizer and a progressive community organizer, had come together and said, we got a real problem here. We all have similar interests in this rural, very deeply rural community, but nobody's talking to one another about it, and we're all gonna lose in the long run. And so they came up with this family table, or this community table type of a model, wherein they put together a potluck. I mean, it seems like overly simplistic, but like, it was a small rural community. They invited folks and they went knocking door to door and said, we're inviting you to come out, and all we're asking is for you to sit down and have a meal. We're gonna be really transparent with you. We want to start having conversations, and we want those conversations to be organic and meaningful and spark some real civil discourse so that we can agree as a community what's important to us and then go after it together. Because we're being taken down. In this instance, there was a corporation that was pressing down on that very rural community in a very extractive way, and it was harming folks on both sides of the aisle or across this political spectrum. And I just, like, it was transformational. It was transformational. And I think we need to see more of that. And we need to be personally moving more of that forward on a regular basis.
Had a group statement or a question.
I'm gonna have to use this just because of
really
the
don't need
camera.
it.
I know, but
The mic doesn't do fun things for me.
it doesn't make you want to sing.
My name is Kristen. I've had quite a long experience in my career working with youth and troubled youth. And some of the things that you guys touched on earlier, almost before you can see change happen, there are some fundamental things that these teens need to learn. How to channel their anger, what to do, how to even carry on a conversation, a constructive conversation, listening, also solution orientation. Like right now, everybody's so focused on what's going on and what's wrong that it perpetuates this feeling of anger. We're also going toward a society where hatred is being taught more and more towards, you know, special interest group or individual groups, anyone that's different than they are. But I'm always feeling like these organizations would benefit by beginning very simply. And that's just like how to talk to one another. So that in order to talk to one another, they can actually come up with solutions and move from that problem-centered lifestyle. And, you know, a lot of it comes from family. It's going to be hard to change tradition, but implementing some of these ideas into the minds of our youth. They've got a lot of passion, a lot of hormones, and there's one or two places it can go. You know, it can go to something that's devastating to them and also destructive to the community, or it can go toward teaching them how to channel that, more productive place for them to put that energy. And then it's almost like from there, then we start talking about, okay, what can you do? Let's give you some things to do that make you active instead of, you know, sedentary, but, you know, yelling about it or, you know, enticing.
I'd love to have the panel build on that a little bit in terms of, you've all worked with people of all different kinds across the political spectrum, as you said, Amy. I'm curious, whether it's youth or adults, can you talk about a time when you had to sort of moderate a situation that was a little contentious? And how can we all engage in civics and community advocacy in a way where we're productive instead of choosing sides?
That was my other question. Okay.
It's big, I'm sorry.
I literally do it almost every day. An example is what you asked for. As recently as this legislative session just passed, I spend a tremendous amount of time in community with folks from all across the political spectrum, and like agency actors who are diametrically, view themselves as diametrically opposed to our mission. And it's been incredibly effective for me to listen first and foremost, right? Diplomacy was not something that came naturally to me. I was burning down the patriarchy for many, and I also, as a post-menopausal woman, have a lot of the hormones still going through. So like tamping down that rage is a daily commitment, sometimes an hourly commitment. But I have found that listening and then, really like absorbing what are those commonalities that I am hearing, and coming back and explaining what I hear you saying to me is, and I'm curious about what has you feeling that way, how you got to that place, and after listening some more, then sharing how I think we can come together, because we actually do have more in common than we do different. I will just give you the example of the mission of the Montana Innocence Project actually has more in common with the mission of the Department of Corrections than we have different. So now if we were all working earnestly towards that same mission, and we were working collaboratively and innovatively towards those mission commonalities, what a different world this would be. We would not be sitting in a place of mass incarceration. And so it's very disarming, when you take that time to listen and really let it sit with you, and be finding the place of commonality because you care about moving forward enough to suspend some shitty comment or, a sideways look or whatever it is. And I think modeling that to young people, organizationally, we invest quite a bit in students. We are a clinical program for law students. We are a practicum placement for School of Social Work students, and we bring those young people. Now they're a little bit older than some of the folks that y'all might be hoping to reach out to, but we bring them with us everywhere. When we have an opportunity to bring them into the prisons, we bring them into the prisons. When we have the opportunity to bring them to the Capitol, we bring them to the Capitol. And we continue to model that type of deep listening and deep curiosity and deep commitment to civil discourse. We don't always get our way, and sometimes we're pretty upset about that. But if you have that true commitment to modeling that and paying it forward, I think that's really where it's at.
I just feel like you say everything so elegantly.
Yeah.
I thought everything in my mind that you said just in dumb words. I'll go a little bit of if that's okay. So my background's social work. I did a lot of mental health work, and I was also a troubled child in a certain way. And I think one thing, especially Montana, is we don't show our emotions a lot. Like, I think it's so, and I think especially for men, it's very hard to show their emotions. I have a father that I've seen cry twice. My brother recently was crying and he told me, oh, I just need to suck it up. And I just wish we could sit and like teach kids too to sit in their emotions. Like, it's okay to sit and be angry, and it's okay to sit and be sad and cry, or any of this. Like, those are very healthy things to do. And once you sit in those and you process a little bit more, it's easier to kind of convert some of that energy to doing something. So I just think that is super important. And I think also giving people grace. I think sometimes we don't know. I think I identified a lot with what you were saying, where it's like, there are a lot of people that have similar goals at the end of the day, and how you get there is maybe different. But I think having grace for each other and saying, okay, like, we want to go the same way, and how can we work together to get from A to B? Because you want to do it this way, and I want to do it this way, and I hate your way, and you hate my way. And like, how can we, just sit and be like, hey, we want the same thing. How can we combine our plans or combine our strategies to get this done? Like, we're going to be so much more powerful if we do that than if we're doing it alone and we're trying to fight against each other. We're never going to get to destination B.
Yeah, so I don't know if I have a Civic Discord example. I have a baby daddy Discord example. I can't think of the things that I've been like running through my mind. I was like, well, like the big discussion on running the nonprofit that I co-founded as a lateral leadership model without hierarchy, and then the conversations that we've had around that, where it's like, well, somebody's got to make the decisions, being the executive director at Inclusum, the Salish Immersion School, and Discord, I guess, around that, where I was really trying to be community, like decision making, and then, and then word came back down to me that they were talking in the kitchen saying that you just want them to do your job. And I was like, they're the teachers. I was just saying, what schedule do you want? Like, do you want to make your own schedule? I will make your schedule. So yeah, I don't really have anything in the realm of like, I think I'll just leave it there. Oh, you have a baby.
I just want to say, I do actually, but I'll save that for you later. I started off by saying that here's my example, and then I didn't actually bring it full circle. But it doesn't always work either. So that, this past legislative session, we had 2 active pieces of legislation moving forward, and we went through this whole process, this radical acceptance and listening and all of these things, and trying to get to this common place, and everything was going very smoothly on one of our bills. And then all of a sudden, we had sabotage from the AG's office, and I will say that out loud. It was true, it happened. And then, some backdoor stuff happened, and we ended up having to kill our own bill. That happens, it happens. And we're gonna pick it up again and keep moving forward in that same process. On the other flip side of things, we were moving forward a reentry bill, and because we had a sponsor that was very conservative, and we had all of the, invited all the players to the table a number of times, we now have the first ever state coordinated Office of Reentry. And it's a very diverse, panel. And so I think there's both sides of those things.
This is as much a comment as a question, but Amy, you just used one of my most favorite words twice in your last response, and that is curiosity. And I think that idea is so foundational to the act of paying attention attention, listening, and seeking to understand, and getting at the solutions. You know, once we know what we have in common, what we want, and how we want to get there. So I'm curious about that notion, that I just said it. I'm curious about the notion of curiosity and the role it might play in civic engagement, or how you go about using that concept in civic engagement.
Good question.
Forming.
Melissa, you answer first. I'm putting her on the spot.
Yeah, I love curiosity too, and I think it's the big why. I think I always am very curious on like what drives people. You know, why do you want to get there? Again, like from A to B, like why is this the only way you want to go this way? Because you know, maybe again, like I said earlier, I've never really been threatened by someone else's opinion because I think it's very important. And I think understanding where someone's coming from is so valuable to understanding how you can work together to go from A to B. So I think it is really important to ask the why and be curious. And I think remembering all of us are, you know, people first, and we feel very passionate about what we want to do. And there are reasons behind that. I mean, I don't know, there are a few people out there, but I don't know many people that are, you know, wake up in the morning and say, I really just want to be a terrible person, and I want to, like, you know, I want to ruin the United States. I want to do this. But I think those people wake up and they want to do the right thing, and they want to move forward. And yeah, I very much hope so. I like to think that. So.
Sure. Yeah, I love curiosity. So I was oddly homeschooled until I was 12, and with no TV at the base of a mountain, and no neighbors until I was like, I don't know what, 7 or something. And so that really kind of instilled in me this innovative creativity, you know, because it was like, there's, you know, how many different ways can I make a mud pie? We can talk about it, you know? And just how I spent my day, you know, and creating these extravagant homes with thorn bushes, you know, doing pretend play. And then when I got into public education and then ended up going down the realm of education, realizing that our public schools are not teaching curiosity and innovation. They're teaching, we're still in the industrial age where, you know, we were training our kids to, you know, jump to the ring of a bell and go to the next thing, and when to have lunch, and so, you know, so I'm hoping, I don't know how schools are doing it today, but that would be something that you know, like I would wish for you know, even for this circle to be looking at those organizations who do have those creative, innovative thinkers, those creative, innovative ideas that are coming towards you, because we need more of that. We need more curiosity. We need to be promoting curiosity, because curiosity breeds innovation, innovative solutions to the problems, the social determinants of health that our community is suffering from.
That curiosity.
I think as much as I try to be curious about what is driving other people and why they maybe are struggling to divert from like their one unilateral path, is when somebody says something to me or presents an idea to me or a way to me, and I bristle against it, recognizing that and pausing to understand why, be curious about my reaction to it and my resistance to something. And sometimes it's simple. Sometimes it's like, that's racist. and it's that simple, right? And other times it's like, oh, but I invested a lot in this kind of idea that I had. Your idea doesn't really line up perfectly with my idea. And so, you know, I talk to my kids about that a lot too, like, just recognizing within their own physiology the response and then being curious about that and encouraging those around me. I mean, I'm not gonna like talk to opposing counsel, they're like, curious. Have you thought about lying or acting like a child right now? But I mean, there are other ways to get there too. And so yeah, and, you know, that reciprocal curiosity is important.
As I'm walking back here, I just have to say, that little thing in my bio about working with Fred Rogers on an exhibit, like the master of being reflective about your reactions, right? The lessons that Mr. Rogers taught us all stay with me when I'm like, yeah!
I don't think I've ever known this person.
I wish Mr. Rogers had recently spoken before Congress for public television. Anyway, I'm old, so I remember that when he was so powerful. I wondered about letter writing, and have you had experiences with that? Because that's been really surprising to me, especially at a local, at a state level. Letter writing campaigns, especially when it's personalized, where it's thoughtful and not just some, but I've been told that it's also weighted. They count how many letters or messages or calls. They count those so that it's personalized, it's weighted, and also that it gives a trail, paper trail, so to speak, that they can use. And anyway, I wondered, so mostly I do it related to youth and environmental advocacy, and sometimes I get called back, and I'm always kind of shocked at that because I write as a grandmother, and so you start talking about when you're a nana, people pay attention. I mean, nanas have power. So when I share that, then people will write back. I mean, I don't know what they think I look like, and that doesn't matter. But I'm advocating for my children, my grandchildren. So anyway, I just wondered if you've had any experience with that, because it's been kind of surprising to me, not kind of, really surprising to me, the difference that can make.
I have not run any writing campaigns or anything, but I have done letter writing specifically. And I think one thing that it does is it puts a face and a story to constituents or people that this is XYZ is affecting. And I think that is really important to be like, I'm a human, I'm not just a number for you, and here's my story and here's who I am. I think that's been so important to do, and I also appreciate when I get written back or called back, and I think those personal relationships really do. I hope that maybe they remember my story when specifically kind of talking about in politics. I hope they remember my story when they're voting on a certain issue that I feel passionate about or that's going to affect me a lot. But I think it's just super important to tell people who you are and how it's going to affect you. It's so much easier for people to understand their power when you tell them how what they're doing is affecting you.
I have extensive experience with letter writing in a number of different capacities, and I could not agree more that the value is significant. I've watched letter writing campaigns save people's lives. So we were successful in getting clemency granted for one of our clients through a letter writing campaign, and talk about transformational, right? We also, quite regularly, and through the organization that I'm with now and through several other organizations that I've worked for or served on boards for, the weight that you were mentioning is important. So personalization is important. I will tell you, most often your letter is not going to get read by necessarily the representative themselves, but it might be read by like the right staffer. And that right staffer might lift up that right letter to the representative, and it can make all the difference. But the numbers make a difference, a huge difference. And so even when you get those, the organization that sends you the email says, click here, right? Here's the form. All you have to do is, that matters. So don't think that it doesn't. Don't think that just because you didn't have the time to personalize something, you can really save somebody's life, literally, by letter writing campaigns. And then the other thing I will say is, and this kind of goes to engaging community and youth in particular, is there's all kinds of letter writing. There's letter writing to representatives, and there's letter writing to individuals. And so it can be incredibly powerful to write letters to individuals who are sitting in, a senior home and don't have family that are visiting them on a regular basis, to writing letters to prisoners, these kinds of things change lives too, and it is a kind of civic engagement. It is a kind of community advocacy. So, yeah, I think letter writing is spot on.
Yeah, that's awesome. I do want to touch on one other subject, and then, does anybody else, before I go that, does anybody else have a question that they want to ask? Because I want to get us out of here on time at 7. But along this line of letter writing and communication and opportunities for individuals, I feel like I've been writing a whole lot of emails and filling out online forms and calling my representative's office and doing a lot of communicating, but it feels sometimes like you're in a vacuum, like you're just sending your best wishes out into the ether. And I wonder if any of you can talk about what kind of response we can best expect, and how do we, this is going to sound very personal, but how do I keep going when I've had the 4th form letter from the Secretary of Health and Human Services?
I think one thing that kind of reminds me when you're like, I don't know if I can go. I think being together and being with people who are very similar minded. I don't know, people in here have probably been to some sort of protest or walk, or I don't know. And I think those always invigorate me. I feel like I can be like beat down, and then all of a sudden I go to some protest or do something and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like, so many people are affected by this, and I feel kind of like rejuvenated and able to, go on and do that. And I think, again, things are easier said than done, and it's easy to get beat down, I think, especially in the climate we're in right now. But I think surrounding yourself and keeping those conversations going is really important to make you feel not like you're the only one fighting a battle. I just think that's super important.
I will piggyback on what Melissa just said about community, right? I think that if you can have like a letter writing and dinner, or you can bring people together. We do a holiday card drive for folks in prisons, and it's like everybody gets together and they're like sharing a meal and they're in solidarity. I think that's a great way to keep buoyed. But the other thing too is, I think that in particular in this moment, there's so much. You could never sleep, and from the 24 hours you could spend trying to advocate for the things that you care about and believe in. And so we need to find those ways and really tap into some strategies to conserve our energy and understand that just because you can't get to it all doesn't mean that you're not like the most civically engaged and committed individual. One of the things that I have found myself doing on a daily basis is saying, okay, like these are the issues outside of what I've got going on for work, right? That I can tackle, that I can really lean into, that I can feel like I'm making a difference on, and cut myself some slack, like give myself some grace for those things that I cannot get to, and know that that there are others out there sitting right in this room that are tackling the 10 other issues that I wasn't able to get to, so that I can just keep going.
I don't know, it's really interesting because at Headwaters, you know, they were like, you know, April, not to ask the Indian, but go ahead, you know, that's why you hired me, is like, ask the Indian. You know, it was like what is the feel in Indian country right now? You know, like, are you talking about it? And it's interesting because I talked to another, you know, he really boots on the ground, really out there doing stuff, and I was like, I realized that like we're like Indian people, and and it might be something because we've been through hell and back. We've experienced the worst of the worst, and so this is kind of just another blip, you know, on the Native trauma timeline, and so it's interesting because we're not. But I'm sitting here and I'm, you know, but I can get fired up about stuff, you know, because I'm like, there is gerrymandering on the Flathead Reservation, you know, yeah, where, you know, like they made the lines, Sanders County cuts right through Dixon. There's a huge Native population in Dixon, and that goes, you know, like into Sanders County. They made the boundary for Missoula County right outside of Arlee, which you keep going and you've got, it made all the, you know, like why didn't they make it the reservation line? Well, we know why, it's gerrymandering. And the same thing for Sanders County. And so it's just, you know, so it's one of those things that, you know, like I want to do a letter writing, you know, like why hasn't anybody, you know, like I've had one conversation with a woman, but and I think what's interesting is that I think we're just kind of like, we're going to get through this. We understand resilience more than the average folk, you know, and so I think that's kind of where we're at, but, you know, but it still really fires me up, you know, like what is happening in the world and what is happening to people, and I do sign the petitions, and and if somebody was like, hey, let's have a gerrymandering letter writing, I would be there, but it's, yeah, so, yeah.
I do just want to note a little bit, and I saw there was one other hand. Do you have a question?
No, we're good.
Okay. So I know that April comes from a strong family background of activism, and I want to also honor that idea of resilience. I think many of us are learning resilience in new ways, and I just, there was a word that came to me almost immediately when I was, as I'm asking my own question, I'm thinking, you just have to be more resilient. I also wanted to note something that you had said earlier, April, about that lateral leadership model or the consensus decision making, and I want to give a big shout out to this group particularly that has done an exceptionally good job with consensus decision making. It was something that I wasn't necessarily familiar with. When the Women's Giving Circle started, there was this big conversation about who's the president and who's the chair or what's the hierarchical structure, and we all sort of agreed that we were not going to do that. And so shout out to everybody that sits through tough conversations until we get to consensus. And it also means that when we decide who we're going to give this grant to, every voice in the room matters. So thanks for setting a good example. And thanks to everybody who's doing that work. And thanks to everybody for being here tonight and listening. if you have more questions, I'm sure that we can filter them to our panelists. And thank you all so much for being here. It was really great.
So again, we want to thank you all for being here, and I just want to point out a couple things. I feel very inspired by this panel. So I again want to thank all of you. Melissa, I hope you realize you are one of the brilliant women sitting at the table. And I know we're in a room with brilliance, and April and Amy both know how I feel, and you are definitely brilliant. But I also want to give another shout out to Molly and your incredible facilitation. And if you are not yet a member and you're inspired to join us, we have a little QR code, or you can find us on the web and join us. Our finalist presentation is October 16th. But there were a few things that were said, so I'm sorry. I am a fan of my humanness, because I have learned over time that compassion isn't compassion if we leave ourselves out. And I know this is a huge topic. Hey Kathy, I just saw you. There's so many different things that are going to be coming our way. But I just want to remind you that whatever you do, it's enough. You are enough, you do enough, you give enough, and the bigger truth is you've always been enough. And so that is one of the great lies of this kind of stuff that goes on, and I just want to honor all of you and say what a great privilege it is to sit in this room, because I've had a heck of a summer. And at all times throughout the summer, I realized, and probably because of who I surround myself with, the privileges that I've been given, is I have felt tired, but I haven't felt not enough for a considerable amount of time. So we get to choose who we give our energy to. And it is a privilege and an honor to have given energy with all of you tonight, to be in your presence. So again, a huge shout out to April, Melissa, and Amy, who I almost called McKenna. Again, I don't know who McKenna is, but I bet she's awesome too. And again to Molly. And I was very remiss, I want to thank this, and I know a couple of them had to leave already, but I want to thank our steering committee members. So we still have Kathy here. Lindsay's getting the goats, that's why she's not here. And Hannah, I can't remember what she had happened, but she's not able to be here. And then to our next year, fearless servant. Because really, if you're a leader, you should be, hopefully you're the chief servant. And Melissa's picked up a lot of my slack this summer and is part of why I felt so supported. So thank you all.